Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Test Case Scenario. I am one of your hosts, Jason Baum. With me, as always, is Evelyn Coleman. Thanks, Evelyn, for joining. And you might be surprised to see our third panelist this week is a bit different, welcoming him back to the show, Titus Fortner. Titus, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Titus felt like I had to call you up, and I was like, "Hey, well, I don't call. No one calls anyway. Right? Like it's typed. I was like, "Hey, Titus, come on this episode of Test Case Scenario because we're going to be talking about a fun topic, a disturbing topic, I guess, making waves kind of right now in the community, at least in our community." And that's the developers behaving badly report that Sauce Labs just recently put out. It's shedding some light on some behaviors of developers doing exactly what it says, behaving badly. The inspiration behind it, because some of us worked on it, was basically, like those memes that are out there and like, oh, push to production without testing, like, and funny, like little funny memes that are kind of circulating. And we're like, well, how true are those memes? Like, that was the inspiration. And then we surveyed, like, I think it was 500 developers to get their feedback and ask them questions that would elicit a response that led to this report, and the findings are disturbing. So I'll maybe read one of them or kind of get into some of the findings, and then we can kind of discuss them. How's that sound? Is that a good way to?
Yeah,
Y'all feel comfortable with that? All right, cool.
sounds good.
Cool. The first one, and probably one of the most disturbing, they're all disturbing, but the first one, which I think is possibly the most interesting, is that in their, and most relevant to testing, I would say, is that in their current role, over 2/3 of the respondents, 67%, admitted to pushing to production without testing, while over a quarter of those do that often. Or I'm sorry, regularly do that. So you've got 67% saying they're just pushing to production. No testing, nothing. What could happen, right? What's the worst thing that could happen?
I'd love a breakdown of why, right? Like we have developers from all over the place. Maybe some folks just never learned. They got pushed into a role. So there's probably a very, very small portion that just are in a role that they don't know how to do that. There's probably some doing it out of desperation. Like, I just would love to break down that 67% into like whys. I'm not saying that it's ever reasonable to do that, but I think that there would probably be a percentage of folks where we'd be like, oh, okay, that's not your fault out of that 67%.
Well, if it's a minor change, right? Like, hey, I'm just going to change a couple things. You could regularly push small changes that aren't likely to break things. And if you know what to expect for breaking or not breaking things, I could see that being part of, like, are we talking like we're making major changes to the code base and then pushing it without testing? Or are we talking, hey, I made a quick update to this method that obviously wasn't handling null and now it does, right?
Yeah, but that's saying that they often do this, like often or very often, like almost 30% said that.
Well, how very often are you pushing major pull requests, right? Like, I am very often making minor updates to things like, oh, hey, let me fix this real quick. Let me fix that. Mm-hmm. Right? Like, they're for the Selenium code base, right? Like, sometimes, like, I am often doing pull requests so that it can go through the whole testing process before I push it. But if it's a minor thing and it's not, no one needs to agree or disagree with what I'm doing, I'll push it straight to trunk. And sometimes it breaks things and sometimes it doesn't. And the more you do it, the more you get a feel for what is unlikely to break things, and you can get away with it. So I don't know. I don't think it's necessarily all bad if we don't know. Like, I'm sure some people are doing it like, yeah, I care about that. Like, yes, I'm making a big change, but I don't want to deal with testing. And I we're seeing that too with in general, with layoffs, with fewer people needing to do more things, with fewer testers dedicated to doing stuff. It's like, who has time? We're being told we need this, we need this. Oh, this is urgent, right? Like, how are we
Yeah.
going to keep up with the stuff we're supposed to do steady state if urgent things keep coming up? And when you're told, no, this is the deadline, you have to hit it. You're gonna do what you have to do because management's telling you have to do it.
I think you just hit on like the key point of that the report makes, right? Is, and we can go through the numbers, but this is kind of the summary piece of what you just said. It's not necessarily, yes, developers are behaving badly. And the report proves it. We all kind of knew that they were behaving badly. The jokes were out there. You kind of got that gist. But the reason that they're behaving bad, it's not like they just want to go mess up the code, right? They're writing bad code, pushing to production. They're like, whatever, I'm not testing it. Who cares? It's they're under a time crunch. There's less people to do it because of layoffs or consolidation of departments, whatever it is. And so it's not really the developer's fault necessarily, right? They're not necessarily the ones at fault here. But it does lead to vulnerabilities and issues, like, and maybe we could speak more to that. Like, what are the issues when you're pushing to production without testing?
I would say it depends on what your software does, depends on what your app does, right? Like, issue a small push to production without testing that you didn't think was going to make a big deal, but your application or your software is life or death for somebody. It's some kind of like military equipment or something that could have huge ramifications versus somebody who's changing, the color of a button on something that they're building for an internal thing that might not be life or death, or it doesn't have financial ramifications for their company. Sometimes there's smaller projects. So there are ramifications, certainly, but I wouldn't say that all of these people doing this are equally at risk.
Marcus and I, when we did that meetup in the continuous testing meetup in San Francisco recently, and we were talking about risk profiles for different companies and how that affects what you should test and how you should test. And I don't know, you see companies like Twitter/X that can get away with all kinds of things because people don't have a great place to move to, and so they're stuck with it. And so they can give you a horrible experience on a regular basis. And did someone push something to production by accident? Yes. Did they fix it because it broke stuff? Yes. Is there going to be a huge exodus from the product as a result of that specific action? No. I mean, I guess we're seeing some.
I was going to say maybe not from that action, but I think we are seeing
up,
well, maybe not because of that, but
add up. Yeah.
but it does,
right? That's fair. And so, and I think this has to do with like the culture that you're creating too, right? Like, I'm pushing without testing. Why is that? It's because we don't have an infrastructure for testing, right? If you've got a process you've put into the CI, it goes through the CI, it gives you useful information at the end, and then you do something with it, then testing is not a burden. It happens. The problem is when you get rid of that infrastructure, you get rid of that process because it's expensive or the people or whatever you're doing, and now all of a sudden you don't have a system that's easy, that's straightforward. And now you're kind of left in that crunch of, hey, I don't have time to just sit here and play with this for a day. I'm gonna release it, and if there's a problem, someone will let me know.
And when we drill further into those numbers, by the way, of that 67% that said that they pushed production without testing, when it's split by age, 92% of the people who are like 58 plus said that they have rarely or never pushed to production without testing in their current job. So it's definitely coming.
Those are the people that have seen things.
Yeah.
See things. That's the rules are written in blood sort of argument where like the rule wouldn't be there if somebody hadn't gotten hurt. Like those people have seen things.
Every single clause in the huge legal document came because someone needed it there. Yeah,
Shouldn't we heed their wisdom though? Like,
but things are also different now than they used to be, right? Like waterfall practices, you used to, spend a lot of time testing it because there really were no checks before. You just you do a bunch of planning, you write a bunch of code, and then you test it for a long period of time. So the idea that you're going to release something without testing it at all is scary. As we're moving to more continuous delivery type things, it's easier to fix it, right? You release something on the web, something breaks, you just jump in and fix it if your system is set up that way, right? Like obviously there are a lot of places where you can't just do that. They still release on a quarterly basis, but if you're able to release quickly, I don't know, is it worth putting all the time and energy to prevent something that's going to happen periodically anyway? Or do you put your energy into fixing the problems that happen? Like, and it's not an either or. You still need to make sure that you're keeping the lights on, right?
and I would love your take, but are you as surprised as I am at Titus being like, I'm surprised on your take here, Titus.
Oh, really? What is that?
Yeah. For someone who's such an avid tester, an advocate of testing, I'm surprised that you're kind of playing this devil's advocate on like not test. Not that it's, I know you're not saying, hey, don't test, but
right.
I get the sense that you're like, I understand the developer, which, okay, that's fair enough. I think we can all understand why they're under the pressure and why they're doing what they're doing, but it's still the right, like you still should test before you push to production, right?
I agree with Titus that things have changed though, right?
Yeah.
Maybe Titus, help me get this out in a technical speak. But when these older folks were perhaps doing their software development, they were building a lot of things from scratch. And the younger folks, when I did, my little bit of coding that I've done, everything was built out of components. And you, to some degree, assume that somebody else had tested it. And everything was kind of modular and you're using all these dependencies. Now the dependencies break, but that doesn't usually, I feel like it comes into play later. Like things work because you're using these fresh new tools, fresh libraries. Things break later. They might not break right away when you're testing them. So you don't get in the habit of things that are brand new being broken the same way. I don't know. I just feel like the culture is different. The coding is different.
Absolutely. Same thing with the web, right? Like the web wasn't like 58 plus, that's pre-web, right? Like these are people that were writing shrink wrap software type things, not creating websites that are dynamic and are built of components. I think Evelyn's exactly right there. They're, one of the things we say, when we speak to clients, don't test someone else's software, right? Someone else needs to test their software, test how your software works with their software. And right, there's a lot to be said for if it's broken, though it's still broken. But like keep in mind you're evaluating what you can make changes on. If someone else's PDF generation software is broken and so people can't download PDF, like what is your action? What do you take as a result of that? Do you choose another software? Do you fix their software, right? Like there are things that you can do and things that you're at the whim of other people based on choices you've made. But
I think we're assuming that each one of these are just minor things like that. So far, all the developers we're talking to are pushing to production without testing. Yeah, this is like a minor thing, a minor change, a minor.
We don't know.
But we don't know. But what if it is a major? What if it's like these are now putting vulnerabilities in place, or like financial risks, or reputational loss? Like I think it's sort of like so.
We're hoping that they're releasing straight to production, minor changes in companies that don't have a risk profile that requires things to be very specific, right? Like this is the what we wish were happening. But I don't. Yeah, I'm sure that there are people that are I don't know, there are a lot of people that take shortcuts because that's just what they're doing until they get caught, right? Like
Yeah, they end up on the news, right? Like we know it happens. We know that these aren't all minor changes that are going to production without testing. We know some of them are major because we read about it on the news, or we encounter it when we want to do an action on the internet and that website is down. I was about to get really specific there, but I don't want anyone to feel bad.
Well, wait. So are you okay with being on the news? Like, this is what I don't understand about.
But you never think it's you, right? That's someone else. It's not your change that's going to cause the problem. Like you know what you're doing. You're just gonna go out there. I don't know. It's one of those things where the chances are low.
Is that a lazy approach or a confident approach?
Ooh.
Like, is this lazy developer or is this overconfident developer?
Both. It's a disconnect between actual risk and perceived risk.
Yeah.
I think.
Interesting.
It's the Jenga blocks. You are pretty confident when you pull that Jenga block that you're not going to cause the tower to fall. But it's everyone's collaborative efforts that then causes the tower to fall. But whoever is the person who pulls the brick, it's the blame's on them. They're the one on the news. But it doesn't mean that the people who are pushing production that may have stacked up all of the issues that caused that weren't to blame. The person who actually makes the tower fall might have actually done testing.
Right.
I love that.
No, yeah, this is great. This is great because complex systems with redundancy and if you assume that other stages are like so many catastrophes come from you're assuming that other people will catch this if it's bad, and then just everyone assumes someone else is going to do it. And again, this comes back to culture. What is your culture? What is your system? What is your process? What things have you put into place to minimize the potential for this? What does your risk profile require you to do? Do you have a risk profile that makes that where you should be doing these things and you're not? Like what are companies doing to protect against hallucinating AIs, as it were?
You're bringing up a topic I want to get into, and I know is like your favorite topic, AI.
I'll have you know, I've been doing a lot of work with ChatGPT the last month. So
for our listeners, Titus, I think, was literally the only holdout to start learning like basic LLMs and like ChatGPT to even just play around with ChatGPT. So
he's a purist.
He is.
Well, also, like I was telling Evelyn before we started here, like it's the process of software creation that I enjoy. And so I enjoy getting deep into something and working through it. And like, what's probably the most interesting thing about ChatGPT and using it for coding that I found is traditionally, what is the general problem? Let me search on Stack Overflow for the general problem, get the general solution, figure out how to apply that general solution to my specific problem. ChatGPT, you just copy paste your problem and it'll at least get you close to what you need, and you can, copy paste it back and keep going. So it speeds things up, but I'm not sure I'm learning quite. But then again, there's a lot of things like I don't know, when I was releasing Selenium a couple of months ago, like I literally spent 3 days trying to debug some weird .NET failures in our CI system that turned out to be like bad cache, right? Like you don't learn anything about how things are working if all you needed to do was delete cache somewhere and you spent 3 days trying all sorts of different things, right? So there's certain things where it's like, yes, give me the faster answer. And there's some things where like, I actually want to learn more about the context of the things that I'm doing.
I agree with you to a certain extent. And I know that this AI thing goes into our next statistic from the web, but as someone who's learning math right now and doing a lot of things by hand that calculators can already do, I feel like what you're saying is reminiscent of like, well, you have to learn how it's done, because if you don't do it by hand, you'll never like learn the greater context of it. And I feel like that's true with any technology at some point. And then we release that idea, and then the general population at least moves forward with their calculators. And perhaps it is still important that somebody out there still knows how to do a bunch of stuff by hand, but I still feel like I could use my calculator now in my class and still go on to learn more complex math because it's just the tool, but like learning how things work is different. I'm not explaining this very well, but
No,
Jason,
I get it. I get it because
totally following.
yeah,
Okay.
no, I think you're doing a great job. And I think I shared this with a few. I was at a conference and heard the amazing Emily Freeman from AWS speak, and she had a great talk about AI and started her talk with basically talking about warships and stuff through history and how every time the new one was evolved, it took out all the older ones because they couldn't compete with it, and this evolution of like the tool to be used to win a war. And it was really, really well done. And that's kind of how it ushered in this conversation of AI and where we're going from here, and how everything we're on like that area in the middle of like we're about to turn a whole new page of how things are done. And then the talk after that was like kind of around GitHub Copilot, and we are getting to the point where developers are going to use AI as they code. It's just happening, and AI code is generated now. We are probably experiencing it on a daily basis and know very little. This is going to lead me to the next survey question, or I guess statistic. 61% of respondents said that 60% of developers admitted to using untested code generated by ChatGPT. And more than a quarter of them do so regularly. So that means they are generating untested code. They are generating code, not testing it, and saying, I'm letting all I need to be done. I gotta head out. It's 4:58. ChatGPT, do this homework for me. Hit send. Okay, we're out the door, and saying the hell with it.
It's interesting because these are like, I don't know, like again, spending time using ChatGPT, but I feel like I'm developing things like I'm writing Selenium code that hasn't been written before. There's no one on the internet that has created the kind of thing that I'm looking to implement in my tool that it's going to draw from. So I can ask specific, I'm trying to do this. Can you provide me this? Or I've been doing a lot of stuff because I write code in 4 languages, right? Like, hey, what is this method? Convert this method from Java to Python, right? And then it'll give me something that gives me something to start with. But there's a lot of stuff that's just wrong. And so it's very scary to me that people are just going to throw something up there and it's like, yeah, it's probably right.
And also, you're using ChatGPT already. Like you're halfway there. Can't you also ask it to generate a test to then also test the thing that you just pulled from ChatGPT? I'm just saying, like, you're already logged in. You're already copying pasting from ChatGPT. Is it really that much to go the extra mile and also ask it to generate a test to test the thing it just gave you?
How do you know it's actually testing the thing, right? Like, I don't know, like generate like, and this is my thing with just AI and testing in general. It's like, how do you know that it knows the thing to test? I
think it's prompt specific, right? You have to tell it.
Well, sure, but like, how do you know that it's evaluating the thing that you need it to evaluate unless you're actually interrogating it, right? Like, I don't know. There are some online discussions out there and some arguments back and forth on some of these things, and I'm not a big fan really of either of the camps, to be honest. But there is something to be said for each side of, you need to have some kind of context for what you're putting in, as well as, yes, but we need to do more with less. How can we do that? And I think the more common the pattern is that you're implementing for, like, how many different ways really are there to implement a shopping cart? In all honesty, like, how many different, like, there are so many, like, to Evelyn's earlier point, like, components that are out there designed for this, that someone has to combine all of the components to do the thing that you need, but it's been done before. That code is out there. Like, there are many ways to do a lot of these things. So maybe it's not that big of a deal for a lot of people. the senior devs are giving the junior devs the easy things to do anyway, right? So maybe it is something that they're just putting ChatGPT in there. But my concern is those junior devs aren't going to become senior devs then, right? Like if they're doing the easy thing that ChatGPT can do for them, then the senior devs are just going to start doing the ChatGPT thing for that, and then doing the stuff that ChatGPT can't do. So that's my thing. Is to Evelyn's point about like the math analogy though, is there are certain patterns and things that you need to understand to kind of get a frame of reference for what things are important or where the optimizations are. I see so many people making just dumb decisions about what they're optimizing and what they're doing. It's like, that's not really the problem. You can fix that and it's not going to help you. This is the place where you need to be focusing. This is where things need to be performant. This is where, right? And if you just don't have a feel for that because you've kind of used your calculator everywhere, not to say that using the tool that helps you is bad, just there is value to frame of reference when you're trying to do complex things.
I mean, basically, and tell me if I'm wrong, to sum it up, you said yeah, okay, I shouldn't have said that. No, I said if I'm wrong. What I hear is you still got to know it. You still got to know it, even though you're going to use the tool. You still got to know what you're talking about.
Maybe, I don't know. It's a scary time. What's that?
I said, how far back do you go? What I'm proposing isn't that you shouldn't still know things. I'm just saying that at some point, the thing that everybody still needed to know in order to understand the fundamentals gets shifted, right? We don't teach code the same way now that we used to teach it 20 years ago, because we've shifted. There's some places where you're still learning on some like very basic languages and things, and you kind of go over them, but at some point we decided that there was like a delineation, like a cutoff, where this is as far back as you really need to know in order to understand the context to do these more complicated things. And I think AI and coding is like the same thing as the calculator. Like at some point, AI, like some point in the future, understanding how large language models works is going to be the line, and no one will go back and understand like object oriented programming. No one's going to take that class anymore. Like one day computer science is going to start right here, and that's so freaky to me, so crazy. So I agree with you, Titus. You do need to have context. It just changes over time.
But right, no, I completely agree with that. I am talking 2023 state of the AI. It's a scary world trying to think of what things are going to look like in a few years. But I also think things go more slowly in the short term than you think, and things go more quickly in the long term than you expect. Is a general aphorism, but
that was the consensus, like after like from Emily Freeman's talk. It was like, look, yes, this is big change, but we're a long ways from the complete like non-existent. We're no longer going to have coders. We're going to have the machines doing it. Like there's at
least there's hype around something real instead of crypto. Like I'm much happier that we're spending a lot of energy in something that might actually provide benefit for real people in the real world.
You and Marcus would agree on that.
We agree on most things, honestly.
Yeah, you really
not only does it provide benefit, and we don't have to talk about crypto, but if I was very confused, I could ask it to explain crypto to me. It was like a double meta benefit of ChatGPT.
So, and we'll know ChatGPT is actually really smart when it says you don't want to actually know about that.
It's true.
So I'm going to try and sum this up, because to me, when I read the report, and I've read it a few times now, the ultimate gist is, well, and actually I'm like thinking about it now, I'm like, or is it? The ChatGPT question really makes me think, that sounds like a lazy developer. That sounds like the developer who's just generating code and saying to hell with it and pushing and not testing. That does sound lazy, but it goes back to what you said at the beginning, Titus. It's like the reason for the laziness. Is it because they're lazy, or is it because of all the circumstances around it? You know, where all these layoffs over the past year. I mean, there was somewhere like 77% of developers said that they took on more responsibilities in the last year due to organizational changes. So
definitely.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I feel like we're all just kind of holding our breath to see what's the ramification of all of this extra AI like if it's just a blip, right? Like if we're not seeing huge failures and lots of people very upset about where things are, like what does that say about the industry, and how do we then respond to this? I am expecting there to be problems and there to be pushback from senior level trying to put systems in place to protect against the problems of devs committing ChatGPT code without testing it. But I don't know. It's a fun experiment, right?
I have a question. I want to try an experiment with you two before we close here. I'm the developer who's pushing to production without testing my ChatGPT code. What do you say to me? You found out I'm doing this. Tell me why. Well, tell me, what do you say to me?
Why aren't you using the system I put together that's really easy for you to run it through the CI and get the test before it goes? Right. So
It's
like
not
really
so easy, maybe.
Really the thing is that you're going to the manager and saying, why are you making it so hard to test? Why don't we have a system in place to make this work? What is the process we're supposed to do? It's now super easy to churn out this code. It needs to be there, that we have some way of validating it. It's more important than ever that we have an easy way to validate, or something straightforward, or something that we can agree on.
Cool.
Gives us the information we need.
Thank you.
I agree with Titus. I think
Yeah.
that we'd have to look at ourselves as the leader and decide why this is happening. And if the reasons are legitimate because somebody's taken on so much extra, then we'll have to put some kind of framework around it. Like, okay, yeah, well, do it when it's A, B, and C. But when it's not A, B, and C, let's go the other mile and do the testing.
Yeah.
Context specific makes a lot of sense to me.
This was a really interesting discussion. Thank you so much, Titus, for joining us. Thank you, as always, Evelyn. And thank you for listening. Hope you had as much fun as we did. This was a really thought-provoking discussion, and we'll probably get back into it, I'm sure, on a future episode. Until then, we'll see you next time for Test Case Scenario.